Hey there. Good afternoon, everybody. If it's afternoon, it is definitely morning for some people. We have a packed house today and 19 states represented. So thanks for taking your time to join us. I'm way too excited and energetic about what's going on in the industry. So I'll see if I can tone myself down a little bit here. I've just had the most fun morning talking to people on the phone about the cool stuff they're doing. And it's just, it's awesome. So thanks for taking your lunch hour, whatever it is, to join us. We appreciate it. A couple of little reminders. You should be able to see our PowerPoint presentation on the screen. That should have come to you earlier today by email, so you could print it out or have it or save it. You can always pick that back up by going to our website. All of our webinars are recorded there. This is the beginning of our 4th year, which is, we just realized this morning, it's really great for us. So 4 years ago, we did a year on operational issues, tuition rate setting, accounts receivable collection, timeless issues, as you know. 3 years ago, we did a year on valuation, what's your business worth, what's your real estate worth. Last year, we focused on real estate issues, and this year we have a focus on staff. I'm so excited about that. I really have some fabulous co-speakers. There are a few people who don't know they're my co-speakers yet, and some of them are with us today, so I'll hit you guys with that later, but got some great content around the tremendous issues with staffing and teaming and building an energetic team that takes your business where you want it to be and provides fabulous things to children. So look for that this year. This year we're doing a monthly webinar. Last year we did, the previous years we were every other month, and there's just too much stuff to talk about. So we're coming to you once a month. So you can go back and pick those up at some point if you want, along with this webinar. Please ask questions as we go. You'll notice on your panel bar there is a tab for questions. It's located near the bottom. I'll try to do about 40, maybe 45 minutes of content and then take some questions. A couple of other things to tell you guys about in addition to the webinars is a couple of upcoming events you might want to consider. If you guys haven't heard, we have shifted this year to doing our own events. We've done a lot of training for other organizations. We'll continue that because we certainly want to support the great work that's happening out there on the state and national level. But this year we made a change to holding our 2 events. One, we got started in November in Nashville with our very first one-day Thrive event. We limited that to 100 people, quickly sold out, which just says there's such a big demand for that in the industry. And what we're doing there is taking each participant into a deep dive into their company's financial picture. What should the numbers look like? Where might they be out of balance? How do they compare to the average company so that they can, in some cases, you know, they're not exactly the average company, and that's okay. There's no such thing as average. It's just a place to start. And then helping them to figure out where to move from that. We had so much fun. We're duplicating that event. Also, in the first part of this year, we're going to do that same event as the first day of the pre-conference for AELL in Orlando in April. Go to their website if you want to look for that. You need to be registered for their conference, which is fabulous if you want to add that day on. And then we'll be adding another city, at least one more for the fall. So look for those events. Also, our first annual conference is coming up in San Diego called Shift. We're designing Shift as an annual place to go to learn and know all the amazing things that are changing and happening in the industry. There's so much that I have 34 speakers lined up for you guys. I could have put 50 in there. I had to stop myself. It's just so much great stuff going on. So I hope you'll find that as a place to meet people, to hear from other people what they're doing. The first day's content is around everything financial. The second day is a combination of a growth track. How do you grow? Where do you get financing? What are the possibilities? What are the challenges? Concurrent with that is a management track with some just awesome content. So really exciting there. And then the last half day on Saturday is dedicated to staff issues, what we'll be talking about as our webinar focus this year. So look for those things. Join us. If you guys email me for being a webinar participant, I'll give you a code to reset your conference fee back to the early bird price, which expired a bit ago. We're getting kind of full on that, and actually our hotel block's getting kind of full too. So I expect we have about 10 more days to before that'll be filled up. But join us if you can. So enough housekeeping. I want to take a dive into this information because this is the funnest webinar for me. I like to do this every year in January, just to share from a 10,000 foot up view what we see going on in the industry. We don't present this because we're smarter than anybody else or we know it all. We present this because all we do all day long is talk to people on the phone and travel and visit people to find out what's going on so we can help people connect the dots with what their needs are and what others have to offer. And so I love to talk about that. And so I use this as a platform to talk about what we saw happen in 2017 and a bit of a prediction about where we see 2018 going. I'll tell you where I missed that a little bit last year, and then I'll tell you where I hit it a little bit last year. So we'll see. We should track my progress on that. So let's jump into this content. Here we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is from an operational standpoint, what did we see happen in the industry? So I think I went away there. So the other thing I was going to say to you earlier was you should see our PowerPoint. You should see me. If you can turn one or both of those things off if you choose. Okay, so here's what we saw happen. And these are just thoughts that we feel like are noteworthy in the way that people operate their companies. First of all, federal level subsidy funds are stable and continue to be stable. So the history of that is that I believe we're in our 25th year of the main funding source for subsidy tuition for families, and that's on the federal level, the Child Development Block Grant Program. Those funds on the federal level have increased or remained stable for 25 years. They have not decreased. I'm glad that we're not in the same room because usually someone wants to throw something at me when I say that because there has been volatility in that funding and it's been very damaging to some business owners. But where we've seen the volatility is not on the federal level, it's on the state level. So states can choose to match that funding or not. Sometimes when they get into issues with funding, you'll see it go away and then come back. So the way it gets matched and administered on the state level can be volatile and can be tricky to work with if you have a school that's majority subsidy. So that's always a little bit risky. It's like having one client, one customer, and when they run out of money or lose their job, then it affects a lot of people. So that can be really volatile. The good news about that is that on the macro level, it has been stable and should remain stable. Most people's opinion is that that funding source, along with the other two main funding sources for childcare, which are Head Start and the USDA food program, no matter what happens in Washington, will see stability. And I'm excited about this. I think Head Start's, I'm probably 40 to 50 years old now. Their funding has been incredibly stable. Historically, though, that money flows from the federal government into a nonprofit organization in each county, and that county uses those funds for traditionally 3- and 4-year-olds, but more often for infants through 2s, which is early Head Start. And traditionally, they've been a little stingy with that money. More recently, we have seen some fabulous collaborations with private childcare providers. And the way that gets administered can look different. They can mainstream students into your existing classes. They can set up classes within your building. They can contract you to provide classes for them. And what's beautiful about it is, well, first of all, it helps fill your building up. So let's go there. The second thing is they have a lot of money. And so the way they invest in buildings and playgrounds, I've just seen some fabulous playgrounds that they funded. And the trick to this one is to get to know the Head Start grantee in your county. If you don't know that person, make friends with them. These decisions are made on a county by county basis, and it's a relationship, just like every other business decision that happens. So just call that person, invite them over, say, we know you're doing great things. Can we come see you? Can we, maybe there's a way for us to work together at some point. So an important thing to do. And you've heard me say both of these two things for 2 years in a row now. So exciting that we've seen stability in those revenue sources and continued collaboration with Early Head Start. So that's exciting. The next one, I think I'm in my second year on as well, that we're seeing more confidence from providers and getting their tuition rates where they need to be to provide the programs that they're already providing. And that sounds funny, but what I find, if there's an issue with financials in a school, is typically that someone's providing a higher quality service than parents are paying for. So it's tricky. You want to do the very best you can. And I'm not saying cut your services. I'm saying, so my strategy for that is to be sure that you're being great stewards of the money that you do get. So you're not wasting any money. That's where benchmarking and figuring out how you can best use your resource comes into play. So good stewards of the money you get. Look at what you're having to pay staff and what those costs are and what your building costs. And then, we can help with this, but back into what your tuition rate needs to be to support that level of programs, and then make a strategy for getting there. We have on our website webinar specific to raising tuition rates. There are also a couple of articles, because there are things you can do in tandem with raising the tuition rate that will increase your financial picture more, like shoring up some discounts, like holding some current tuition rates but increasing on incoming families. So there's some great strategies there, because we're going to talk about in just a minute the challenge we see coming up in the future that's already started in the balance between tuition rates and salaries. But more confidence in getting those rates up where they need to be. Surprise, surprise, struggles with staff culture, which is why we're dedicating a whole day to it at Shift this year. It's why we're dedicating a whole year of 12, actually it'll be 11 webinars with creative ideas. I regularly talk to business owners who are struggling with staff culture, and they want to really be critical of their staff. And I'm not saying people don't deserve it at times and they need to vent, and nobody should feel bad about doing that. But our staff is where they are. And the strategy for us this year is to talk about how do we meet people where they are, give them the support and resources that they need, and create a dynamic team. So we want really solution-based information out here. We don't need to say whether these staff just needs to, the M word I call them, are wonderful millennials, and they're not all, whatever our perception is of it, but we do like to talk about it. But how do we meet people where they are, meet their needs, and meet our needs and the needs of children at the same time? So that's our focus for this year. Okay, back to something financial. Not that these all don't touch our financial, but Big challenge right now, balancing staff pay with tuition rates. And so to me, this is probably the most significant change we saw in 2017. So all of a sudden, and some of this is market specific, but I really think it's across the board, all of a sudden what we're having to pay to attract staff has really increased dramatically. So there's always an increase, you know, it's the thing that happens slowly over time, and tuition rates increase and what we have to pay to get staff in increases. But a really drastic change in 2017. And what happens and this is kind of my perception of what happened, is that we haven't been able to raise tuition rates enough to offset that very fast change. So this is something I'm monitoring for 2018 to see if there are more strategies we can help support people with, to see if we need to change something about our financial model that we can help. It was just very dramatic, the increase there. And if we look at tuition rates, you know, as the other side of that equation, the industry as a whole, I feel like, got behind in 2000. Well, so it started in 2009 and 10, but the world was struggling. So we made a contribution to that, and we didn't raise rates as much as we typically did. That's okay. What happened after that, though, we didn't start catching up. So now I think we're behind. And at the same time, there's this big increase in what we're paying staff. So we're watching that for this year. Second thing we're watching that we saw in 2017 is dramatic increase in parents paying tuition with credit cards. Good news about this, less issues with collections. You have your cash faster, less trips to the bank if you're still even doing that. Flip side of that is increase in credit card fees pretty drastically. So this is an administrative cost that's hitting most people's bottom line. So not unusual that from one year we had $0 to $6,000 to $12,000 for an average high school in credit card fees. So that's got to come from somewhere. You know, we have to balance that somewhere. And again, it's difficult when we have a limit to how much we can increase tuition rates a year. Bigger focus during the year of 2017 on branding. This is one of the content deliverables at our conference. We're going to talk about concepts in branding. And if you're like me, you know, historically you hear branding and its colors and the logo. We're not talking about that at all. I'm talking about really digging into who your company is, what it believes in, and how you communicate that to prospective parents, current parents, and staff, and how you come together around it. So it also plays into this staff culture and getting them involved in developing and maintaining your brand. But also, we're doing such fabulous things in the industry, but we're not the greatest at communicating those. So this is another strategy toward that. Two other things to talk about from a programmatic standpoint. One thing is outdoor classrooms. You know, we've tinkered around with that as an industry. I see it in some spotty places, but huge shift in that recently. Again, you know, we're bringing a lot of this content in San Diego, but on the last day there is a tour for one of our friends who has a school in San Diego, the most phenomenal outdoor classroom I've ever seen. So these are not just, these are teacher-driven classrooms where there's a classroom teacher for that outdoor space, and they're the tinkering classroom and the art classroom and the music classroom, and it's just phenomenal what things are going on there. And by the way, often they're less expensive than the big, huge piece of playground equipment and then licensing gives you a hard time about. So really exciting concepts going there. And the last one, and people give me a bit of a hard time about this because they say, we've been doing STEM and STEAM forever. We just haven't called it that, you know, or we haven't, not that we haven't called it that, but we haven't really said, hey, we're a STEM school or a STEAM school. Well, there are others who are promoting themselves as STEM and STEAM schools now. So it's important to be sure that you incorporate those, not you incorporate those concepts because I think you already are, but you incorporate the fact that you're doing these things in your marketing. One of our national groups has started a specific STEM brand, and they're building schools that are promoted as technology-driven STEAM schools, and they're really hitting some communities hard. And it's of great interest to families, and in certain areas, especially where you have a high degree of engineers or certain professions that really value that. So those are the things we see. I'd love, if you guys see other things, pop into that question panel, let me know, and we'll bring those up at the end. All right, so let's talk about what's happening in the world of transactional shifts. So we talked about what happened in operations, so let's talk about what we see happening in transactions. So first of all, as far as how the business community is going, franchises are still the fastest growing segment of the industry. There are some new, if you guys get the Childcare Information Exchange's top 50 list in their January, February edition, it's sort of something that we use regularly to know who the players are and reach out and be sure we understand what their interests are and what they're doing. Last year, for the first time, they integrated the franchises into the list. They continued that trend this year. Makes sense to me. They do have them in a different color, so you can see who they are. And so there's some high-level national groups, just like some of our other community-based groups. What's interesting, though, is I see this group of smaller multi-sites, and I'll say smaller, but 5 to let's say 20, 25 schools. And a lot of those are doing a hybrid model now. So they'll do a franchise component, but they also have company-owned schools. And a big diversity in how they feel about those. I've got one that says, I'm not going to do any more franchises because they're just as hard to support and I can't control them and I feel like my liability is greater. Other people will say, we want to do as many franchises as we can because people manage those, they own them, they manage them on a different level and they're less work. So a real diversity in how people feel about that. From a financial standpoint, they typically earn 6% of the company's revenue. So for that trade-off, you should have to do less because you guys know, like I do, to be basically financially healthy, we need a 15% bottom line. Love to see you at 30. But if you're stuck at 6, there's a limit to how much money you can make off that school if you're a franchise company. National companies are in big development mode. So they're acquiring, you'll hear me say that too, but the biggest change during 2017 is they started building as well. So it's becoming recognized that there's some underserved pockets in the country, and it's typically right in the middle. I have a great map of the country that shows the housing starts across the country, and they're, popped right in the largest growths right in the middle of the country. Happy to send you that if you like it. Just send me an email. So that's been really interesting that, they have to grow. These guys, the business they're in is to grow their companies. And where they historically would do acquisitions, they still are doing some of that, but it's easier sometimes just to go with a building campaign. So you're going to continue to see new schools being built. So the new shiny is coming. So let's get back to the branding, because branding's not only how you act and behave, it's how your building looks, and it needs to be competitive with new and shiny in case it comes into your market and shares a fence line with you and you're not prepared for it. So look out for that, new building in new markets. Pricing is high but stable. So you heard me last year say we didn't think we had seen the top of the pricing for businesses. I thought we were probably at a stabilization mode for real estate. And that's kind of what happened. I think we're stable for both now. So what we saw was real estate, and it didn't dip. So, real estate prices are at the highest I've ever seen them. Continued investment there. Business prices are stabilizing, but they're still pretty high. And where we're seeing the biggest increases, there remain, and I just noticed this in the last month. So this is kind of a change. We saw for several years new equity companies really trying to get into the market. Then it didn't go away, but it kind of flattened out for a while. Just in the last month, a lot of renewed interest in that. And so when they see a platform company, a company that's big enough to grow off of, which includes the management, the ability to build a bigger organization. They're paying pretty well for those because it's hard to find, and they want in the industry, and they believe they can do add-ons at a better value. So continue to see that. More options for real estate funding and sales. Yeah, that continues because we've got both institutional and individual buyers for real estate. Talk about that more in just a minute. And then performance for everybody is strong right now. So optimism is, really good. The national guys are doing really well, which sets the bar for everyone else to do well. So I know in a highly competitive environment, the first thing you think is, these national guys are in competition with me. I wish they'd just go out of business and close down. We get it, it would fill up your school probably and you do really well. And so on a micro level, maybe that's something, that would help individual schools. On a macro level, if anyone, especially the larger organizations, don't perform well, it makes life difficult for everyone from other respects, like getting financing. And this isn't just at I'm a 100-site company and I want some private equity money. This is when you go to the bank to build a new school or refinance or get playground equipment or buses. If there's an industry challenge going on, they will know that, and it makes them not so optimistic, and then makes your life harder to get funding. When they're performing well, then we all do well. There's some recent challenges from one of the national groups who will probably throw some negativity into the industry a little bit. So there's some financial challenges going on with one of the larger organizations that is not public information, but likely enough for me to at least mention that there's probably some of that going on. I still think overall, though, the national organizations are in great shape. And for reasons I mentioned, we should be happy about that, even if they're competition. Okay. So let's talk about large transactions that were completed during the year. So this is funny. I just wanted to put a blank screen up here. It's got question marks instead. But the reason for that is there really weren't any. And so when I say large transactions, what I mean is the national groups that may be sold from one to another. And for about 3 or 4 years before that, there were several, 2 or 3 of the larger, Childcare, La Petite, Rainbow, some of the larger national groups traded, and those give us a benchmark for where the industry is and what they're paying. There just happened to not be any in 2017, and that doesn't mean anything other than they weren't in the right cycle for 2017 to hit. So I don't have that information for you this year, except to say that they all report to us that operations are strong, and some of those are in process to shift from one owner to another. So we'll see some of those, and I think those are going very well. So that helps us all. But none of those 2 report this year. Okay, let's talk about who our business buyers are. So, and the way they look at things. So competitor companies are companies that operate in the industry who buy on a regular basis. The largest of those are larger in size. They have resources, they have processes and people, and they are largely private equity owned. Most of the companies who have 50 schools or more, I think there are only 2 that are not now private equity owned, which just means that they're owned by an entity that takes private individuals' money, they invest it, they make it more profitable, and then they sell it typically within 5 years. Some of those have different strategies, but that's the typical strategy. So those guys continue to buy, and they continue to add on to their portfolio. They're pretty easy to work with. They have legal documents and processes and people, and those are the main buyers in the industry. The second opportunity there, and I mentioned this early, would be a private equity group that wants into the industry, more aggression from those guys, higher valuations, again, because they really need a pretty decent sized platform. It's been, so this has been another interesting thing, a change in 2017. Private equity got into the industry in about 2008-9, and their game plan initially was to start with about 100 schools. So they didn't want to get in unless they had a company to start with that was about 100. That quickly went to about 50 because there weren't that many. If you look at the top 50 list, I think they're only, they're less than 10 that have more than 100 schools. That quickly went to 50. In 2009, we helped one of those get in with about 40. And 2 years ago, we worked on a transaction of 24 and had many equity groups interested in that. One very interesting thing that happened in 2017 is there are now, I believe, 3. So you guys heard me say that we're getting a lot of contact by private equity that wants in the industry. I think there are 3 who now either have closed on or are in the process of closing on a group that's less than 10 to get started in the industry. That's pretty big. That's a pretty big change. Because again, for that platform company, they typically will price up, want to get in and get an infrastructure. So that's been an interesting change. We'll see where that goes. And then we saw, just from our contact, we saw a decrease in what I call search funders. I think that's an actual term, but that's mine anyway, which are a couple, which could be a husband, wife, could be 2 friends or partners, but 2 people who want to buy a company to operate and are being funded by a group of investors. So what they do is they spend about a year, they go out and investigate a certain industry, they find something that they want to buy, they go back to this investor group and say, here's what we want, who wants to participate? So really interesting, and we've not sold to one of those, but we've worked with several of them who have looked at some of our opportunities. Didn't get contacted nearly as much in 2017 by this bucket of business buyers as we did in the couple of years before that. Not sure what that means, just report in the news. Okay, so now our main real estate buyers are REITs and individual buyers. So on the institutional level, a REIT is a real estate investment trust. It works like private equity in that it takes private individuals' money, it invests it, and it typically, though, for a long-term hold, not to sell it quickly like a private equity company would. These guys, there are 7 nationally that we're aware of and work with regularly that invest heavily in childcare, and there's a good bit of competition there. Prices are fabulous. They're great to work with. Typically, you have to have some size. Until 2017, they'll invest in any real estate that's owned by a larger organization. However, in 2017, we had a client who had 2 fabulous schools but wanted a 3rd. And we matched them up with one of our REIT buyers who bought one of their 2 schools and funded a new development. To our knowledge, that's never been done in the industry. So what we may see is the same thing we saw happen on the private equity level, in that there's so much desire and competition to get into the industry that we may see that change, and we may see more flexibility in the people who can use that resource. At our conference in San Diego, I'm sorry if you guys are tired of hearing me talk about it, I'm just so excited. But we do have one of our private equity clients speaking, and a REIT client speaking, and a traditional SBA lender speaking. So we'll try to hit all segments of the ways to finance growth. So that's coming up. On the individual buyer front, that remains strong. So there's still a base of individuals who will invest in childcare, real estate. That we usually go the REIT direction because that pricing is almost as high. I think we can usually get a higher price from an individual. The downside to that is we typically would have to have the business sold first, so it has to be a 2-part transaction. individuals want to know that that transaction's already complete, and then they'd be interested in the real estate. Other kind of minus is they don't quite have the same level of resources, usually have to get financing, and maybe a little less experience than the REIT. So, but also just another opportunity. So happy to have as many opportunities for people as possible. On the valuation side, I said most of this, multiples for businesses are stable. We saw that stabilize in 2017. At the end of 16, we thought we saw cap rates for real estate stabilize, and that was true. They have pretty much normalized. Another trend that we see continued is that people who are buying, it's not surprising to anybody who's worked with a bank recently. If you go get financing or buy or sell something, you're refinancing your house, then there's so much caution and looking at numbers and paperwork and asking questions and other diligence. Not that caution isn't good, it's just, it seems much more robust right now. We'll put it that way. I almost said extreme, and maybe I could go there, but at least very robust in what they're doing with diligence and verifying numbers. So the process of buying and selling has gotten a little more complicated. Okay, so a couple of things to talk about. Here's kind of where we see 2018 going. I'll tell you again which ones I hit and didn't last year. I think confidence will continue to increase. I just see some really fast energy going on, and I think that the industry will remain it will remain energetic and of interest to the investment community, and that helps everybody. I think we'll continue to see enrollments high and tuition rates increasing. Again, if this is a focus area for you, let us help you with some strategies. At least go pick up one of our articles or webinars on the subject and see some ways to work with that, because there are two things we see when people are struggling. Either there's not a strong matchup of tuition rates with the service, with the salaries mainly, but you know that parlays into services being provided, or tuition rates with the real estate costs. That one's harder to get around because we can do more with getting staff costs under control than real estate costs. So subsidy will continue to be stable. No reason to think it won't. Again, most everybody believes no matter what happens in Washington, and not much is happening there, but that will remain stable. Buyers continue to avoid subsidy, predominantly subsidy schools though. Not that there's not a vehicle for that, but it definitely limits the pool, and I think we're continuing to see that happen. They believe that subsidy, again, like I mentioned earlier, is a single pay client. So if you're 70% subsidy from one subsidy source and there's a funding issue, crash, most everybody has a good tolerance up to about 30% subsidy. There's some that like will go up to 10%. There's some that will just have none. And by some, I mean on the national level. We'll see continued new development. It's all over the place. New brands, new development. I know most of the companies we work with have 8 to 20 schools in development right now in different markets. Some of those are redevelopment. They're repositioning some older real estate into a brand new building. I love that one, when people can just move logically and you can put them in a new building, but that will continue. We think we'll see, I think business and real estate values have stabilized, but still high. I think that'll continue, and I think we'll see maybe a little more aggression for entry companies just by what I'm feeling in the last couple of months. Last year I said I thought there would be some new administration changes that might actually help us from a operational standpoint. Well, that's the one I missed. I don't see that happened. If you guys had a different experience and anything has happened, nothing's hurt us, so that's good news. Don't see anything that's really helped us from a business standpoint. I think the tax law changes and tax reductions will probably hit more, you know, C corporation, Fortune 500 companies, which hopefully will then reinvest in our economy like some of them have reported, but who knows. But I'm not really yet seeing that trickle down effect, except that unemployment also is at the lowest point it's been since the 70s, which again, we always have one of two major issues: not enough enrollment, tough time hiring staff and paying them the right amount of money. I don't know about you guys, but I think we've forgotten how bad that not enough enrollment piece was, and now we're focused on the having to pay staff too much. I'd much rather have an issue with staff and have a full school, because it all starts there. If we don't have the revenue, none of the rest of what we're talking about matters. So much rather go in that direction if I had to. Before I talk about the next class, I was thinking, I'm gonna throw one more thing out here at you guys. I was thinking as I was putting this together that there's been an interesting progression. So this is my 32nd year in the industry. I'm just the most blessed person ever, because it's been fabulous, and every day I just get more excited about what I'm doing. But I was thinking about, we get a lot of calls from owners, and they tell us the great thing they're doing, and we love it. There's certain things that over time have become just things that are basic, you know, that used to be fresh and energetic, and now, you know, sometimes I'm thinking, yeah, that's good, doesn't make you special. So, you know, I'll have somebody say, we don't just babysit, we do this and this and this, and yeah, everybody else is too. So there's no babysitting anymore in our industry. It's just not a place for it in the market, and so sad for children too. So let's just say that. I mean, no one's just babysitting anymore. And this is kind of the progression of the new hot thing in the industry from my standpoint. I will probably think of a few more over the next couple of days. But just as I was getting started 32 years ago, computers, I mean, that was just it. About that time, I remember, if any of you go back this far with me, the first compact computer desktop I got, it was this big, but you know, we thought it was great because it sat on the desk, had this little keyboard that folded down. It probably weighed 50 pounds, but it had a handle. You could move it. So we thought that was great. It cost $5,000, and it was 512K, which was great at that time too. But we were just putting computers in the classroom. So that was, you know, new and fresh and exciting, and kids were learning keyboarding and how to do that. Not far after that, we saw some foreign language instruction. And I want to say instruction because I'm going to talk about it in a different way in a minute. Instruction is a foreign language teacher, and that time it was probably French. Later it moved predominantly to Spanish, and now we see a lot of Mandarin to go along with that, or the combination of all of those. But it's a teacher in front of the classroom teaching the colors and numbers, and that was good. So good exposure to a different language. Then we saw a focus on wellness, and that came in two forms. It was healthy eating. So now we're you know, at the time where we're doing healthy eating and we're exercising, and we're teaching that to children. About then, in my opinion, STEM concepts were being introduced in the classroom. We didn't call it that, and we didn't say we're a STEM school, but there was a lot of science and math and project-based learning going on in the schools. Not long after that, we saw a shift from language instruction to language immersion, meaning, and so in my mind, there was kind of a gap in there. So there was, you know, these basic things going on for a long time. And I don't think this language immersion concept probably hit till 8 to 10 years ago, probably. And language immersion means at some point we only speak this language in the classroom. So we're doing our normal things. We're singing, we're dancing, we're teaching, we're learning, we're having fun. We aren't just drilling into you this language. And along with the language was culture. If people speak this language, where do they live? And what do they eat? What do they believe in? How do they celebrate? What do they do? So a real focus on culture. Love this one so much. Some of our public schools are doing that now too. So love that focus. We morphed into mindfulness, which was, you know, launched off of wellness, but mindfulness with a focus on meditation and calming down and thinking about the world in a different way. Mindfulness is still a little creative. Language immersion is creative and unusual. Parent communication tools are fast becoming the norm, but not exactly. But today's age group of parents loves quick communication with photos and updates. And so a computer-based parent communication tool in the classroom is not broad-based, but popular and becoming a little more of the norm right now. Now we're starting to call our STEM and STEAM brands STEM and STEAM, and parents are recognizing that. And then outdoor classrooms, like I mentioned before. So those are the progression. Love your feedback on that too, because I know some of you guys and you've been around with me, maybe not quite that long, but almost that long. So before I check out the questions, and there a good many have popped up here, so please keep those coming. Our next master class is on March 8th at 1 o'clock, same time. I think this morning wrote a speaker in with me, but I'm not sure she committed 100%, so I will leave her name out, but I will just love for you to hear what she has to say about staff and the energy that she's bringing around it. But I think we'll have some great content during 2018 around staff and staff issues. So let's see what you guys are thinking about for questions here. Okay. Okay, well, thank you. So this isn't a question, but somebody said, I can't be at shift, but please hold a spot for somebody I'm sending. Okay, we will do that. We'll talk about that. I love this. Okay, so that's good, but it doesn't make you special. No truer words were spoken. I'd add, you're not entitled to anything. Okay, thank you. That's good. Got to give that some thought. Thank you for that addition. Looking forward to seeing you too. Regardless of what you do, you must do it well. Be the best of what you do. Thank you. Yeah, so, you know, I say to people a lot, we're specialists in financial areas, and I know enough to be dangerous on operational issues. I know what is sexy and pops in people's heads when they hear it. It's a kind of a wow factor, but I agree with that. Know who you are and do it really well, and think about the wow factor and think about how you're communicating it to parents, because I think that's the biggest struggle that most companies have, because they're doing fabulous things in the classroom. How much should I be paying teachers? Yeah, tough one. Okay, so I talked about the growing challenge, and this is nothing new, always been a challenge, but the growing challenge with the matchup between tuition rates and paying teachers. So I'm gonna loop around that question. Let me go backwards on that question. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to be sure that you are carefully managing hours. So we're gonna come from a backwards direction to make this decision, like I said. So be sure that you are carefully managing hours. One of the things I would love for you guys to tell me is that there exists some, I'll call it magical, but let's call it, you know, I don't know what, some technology that would manage staff hours for us. But here's what I believe has to happen to manage staff hours. I think you can use technology to do two things. I believe you can use it to predict children's schedules and to then create a matched up schedule with your teachers. You can lay the foundation for that. But the world is never going to look like that prediction, not one single day. And then the flu comes along, and then there are vacations, and then somebody leaves, and then, you know, there's a constant change in the classroom. So once you have that baseline, I feel like you have to work with and train your staff to work with you on the management of hours. And when I say hours, I don't even mean hours. I mean 15-minute increments, which we typically see in the early morning hours and the late afternoon, when a combination can happen. And you got to be smart about combinations. You're not going to put your infants and after schoolers together. You're not even going to put your threes and after schoolers together. So let's don't be crazy. But when you can combine classrooms and save the small amount that it takes, that will get you farther than anything I'm going to talk about with tuition rates or what you pay your staff. So be sure that you are doing that. We're going to talk about that at shift. I want one of you to stand up and say, I know how to do it easily and perfectly. I will be your new best friend, but I believe that the answer is that you have to manage this on a everyday 15-minute, day-by-day, classroom by classroom basis. So do that first, okay? So step one, you are being a fantastic steward of what parents are already paying you and what your staff are making already. So know that you're doing that. Then I want us to back into what you have to pay people based on the tuition rate. So step two is, let's look at your current tuition rate. How much can you afford in total to pay for salaries? And we will break that down all the way to what that converts to for an average hourly rate, knowing it's not going to be average. You got some disparity with education levels and what class they teach, but at least you'll have a baseline of average. Now, if those two things don't match up, then we're going to go from the other direction. So then you're going to say to me, okay, you said it was $9.10 an hour. No way in, snowball's chance and, that I can ever do that. I can't pay less than $11 an hour, $10.50 an hour. No way can I get anybody. Then you and I are going to go from the other direction. If I have to increase my average rate that much, then tuition rates or total revenue, I want to stop talking about tuition rates, I'm sorry. Total revenue needs to go from here to here. Now, what are our strategies for that? Number one, there's a tuition rate strategy, but there's probably a separate strategy for current families and incoming families. Don't have to be the same. We can change it. We can have two different strategies and two different rates. We can have as many as we want. So there's the first thing to look at. The second thing is, what are we doing for other charges, other things we charge for in the school, and what are we doing for discounts? And I have been the preachiest person in the past couple of years on discounts and what we give away. We have to give discounts to be competitive. You have to give your teachers and multiple children in the same family. There's no way we're going to get away from them. There are certain ones you can reduce or eliminate. So I want to say that I can't, and also the staff, what you have to pay them for them, it's a little market driven. So I'm sorry that was such a roundabout way to answer that question, but important to look at it that way. I'm on your team. If this is a struggle for you, call me. I like nothing better than to play a numbers game with you. All right, new questions. Please remind all the directors, it's really the teachers that keep the family happy. The director can sell the school, but in the end, take care of the people who work with the families every day. Thank you so much. One of my shifters. We've got 6 people at the conference who I believe are moving the world. There's so many, it's hard to choose, but this is one of my 6 shifters who will talk to you about your school. But absolutely, thank you. I mean, this is, we transition a lot of schools, as you guys know, so we buy and sell schools. And this is what happens when a sale is announced. It gets announced to the parents and, they think about it and they think about this new owner. At the end of the day, they walk in the classroom and they look at that teacher and they say, okay, something's going on here. Are you still here? And the teacher says, yes. And they say to the teacher, is this okay? And if the teacher says, I think it'll be fine, let's work through the transition together, then they're fine. Because, I hate to burst the bubble of and directors are important too because they're your troubleshooters. But it goes teachers, directors, owners. And I say to owners a lot, I don't want to burst your bubble, but I don't think parents care as much about you as they do the teachers. So let's be careful in this transition that we really take care of those people. It is tough out there. So thank you for that reminder. I mean, absolutely. Again, big reason we're doing such a strong focus on that in 2018. Carrie, I know, let me see if I can get to this last question. What should you do with your current company to strongly position yourself for the next phase of expansion? Where will we get the most return on investment, operations, manual savings, lean P&L, brand? What do the most successful companies do? Okay. What are we going to do at our current company? Okay, good question. Several things. First of all, you're doing some of it here, so know what's happening in the industry. Second of all, stay in front of best practices and systems that help you easily get information. The most important thing is grow your people. To the point, surround yourself with people who won't even allow you to sit still, and then grow them to the point where if you don't create opportunity for them, you know, they're going to be bored to death. And have that team so strong that they don't even miss a beat. They jump in and they're ready to do this. So team first. Second of all, reach out to resources for growth. It's a tough thing to answer where you go for growth. Do you build? Do you acquire? Do you expand your existing school? Here's my opinion of that. You work your way toward all of those. You investigate and you seek out and you work your way toward every single type of growth, and then the right answer becomes apparent. Make your decision based on what you can do with that school, what it looks like financially. Be sure it's smart. You heard me say that most things are easy to get around. The hardest thing to get around is overpaying for something because you can't back up from that resource. Happy to help you. We don't have to be a part of your actual growth or your acquisition or your build to give you advice on what it looks like from an opportunity standpoint. And sometimes we're just real honest. You know, we're not the best resource for you there. We got enough to do. You do too. We don't need to waste your time or ours. So people first, and then look at every type of opportunity, hone in on the one that makes the most sense. You have to be opportunistic at the end of the day. Have a growth plan, but then be opportunistic. What are examples of STEM branding and instruction that are being marketed? Good one. We have an outside computer instructor that comes. What else should we be doing to qualify marketing as a STEM school? Okay, so Learning Care Group, the nation's second largest group, La Petite, Child Time, Tutor Time, Children's Courtyard, Montessori Unlimited, Creative Kids, and their new STEM brand, which is Everbrook. I always want to say Evergreen, Everbrook. So they have opened their new Everbrook schools in Detroit and I believe Minneapolis. They have 5 under construction in the DC market. Big visions to grow that brand. So look at that one and the way that they market it. Most of the companies are using a concept of project-based STEM in their classrooms, but this particular brand has and I think you'll find this in a lot, they have a STEM room. You can think about it like a computer lab if that's your focus. You can think about it like some brands have a gym because they have a wellness focus, but they have a room where they do activities that center around STEM concepts. So I'm not your curriculum guru. Reach out to me if you'd like some more resources for that, and I'll let you know. But in addition to them who are doing a real focus on the brand that matches up with STEM, a lot of companies are promoting themselves as STEM-based classes and STEM-based schools now. What do you have to do? There's no designation for this. You're probably already doing a lot of it, but I would do some things that really pop and focus. You need to be able to communicate to families what you're doing that is different and probably have some STEM-based projects. It is 2 o'clock. Are we good on questions? Okay. Woo! Thanks so much, guys. As you can tell, I could sit here and talk to you guys for the rest of the afternoon, but you have things to do. And I am honored that you will spend your hour with us. Again, if you have any follow-up, reach back out. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope to see you on March the 8th for the first of our staffing series for this year on our webinars. Take care.